Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
When it comes to takedown model speed boots, you probably don't think of Mizuno, and historically, due to just availability outside of Asian markets, it's really only been the super expensive stuff that you could get your hands on. However, things are changing, and inside this box, I have their kind of mid-price point speed boot option that I would argue is better than just about everything else in the category. Say hello to the Mizuno Alpha Pro, the boots that sit 2 steps below the top-end Made in Japan variation, those running you $320, and 1 step below the Alpha Elite, which bear a retail price of $200. The Alpha Pro, however, isn't inexpensive, but certainly less expensive than the models above it, retailing for $160. However, unlike so many takedown model speed boots where it almost seems like the brand made them worse on purpose just to protect the top-end models, the Alpha Pro shares so much in common with the more expensive options above it, both objectively and subjectively. For the price, I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find anything that feels better than these. It also is in the same price range as popular takedown model options like the Mercurial Vapor 15 Pro at $150, and of course the X Crazy Fast Point 2 at $160. This of course begs the question, if you have roughly $150 to spend on a new pair of speed boots, is the Mizuno Alpha Pro the best bang for your buck? I'm going to do my best to answer that question in today's video. As we go over all the details of the boots, we'll compare them to the more popular mid-range speed boot options from both Nike and Adidas, and of course take a look at how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy these brutally honest reviews, perhaps would like to see more videos on takedown models, don't forget to drop a like on this one, and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. Now there's no question that speed boots are and have been the most popular category of football boots for quite some time now. There's just something that really appeals to people in regards to a football boot designed around being as fast as possible. Here's the thing about top-end speed boots though, what makes them so distinctive compared to everything else is the thin upper, the lightweight design, and typically the super tight wrap around your foot, something that you are more often than not going to find from the speed boot offerings at those top price points. When it comes to takedown models, however, what we often see from just about every brand is kind of a dumbing down of all of those elements, sometimes intentional, sometimes unintentional, where realistically, if you're after that speed boot feel, you are very often not getting it at lower price points. In the case of the Mizuno Alpha Pro, however, talking about the upper specifically, I truthfully cannot tell a difference between the upper on this $160 model compared to the Made in Japan $320 variation. Unless you legitimately had the Pro on one foot and the Made in Japan variation on the other, you would be hard pressed to be able to feel or notice any significant difference between the two uppers, which is absolutely unheard of, not just in the speed category, but amongst kind of football boot lines in general. Typically when you go from $320 to quite literally half that retail price, there's going to be a major difference in the feel and material of the upper. However, in the case of the Alpha Pro, and maybe it's because Mizuno is a brand that realistically does specialize in leather boots, the Mizuno Alpha definitely being a kind of uncharacteristic release for them, but one that I think that's been super underrated. But in the case of the Mizuno Alpha Pro, that same kind of foam-based synthetic with kind of a textile overlay, it's super thin, it's super pliable, it's incredibly comfortable on your foot, and if you're looking for that raw barefoot sensation, it's pretty much as good as anything that you're going to find in the speed category, high end or low end. And considering that these are half the price of some top end speed boots, that's just super impressive. Something else I really love about the upper of the Mizuno Alpha in general, not just the Pro, is that more traditional U-throat construction with the central lacing system and standalone tongue. tongue, where the tongue itself is admittedly a cheaper foam-based synthetic material rather than kind of like this fused mesh with a little bit of memory foam that you will find on the more expensive Elite and Made in Japan variations. However, it's a minor element and I really didn't have any issues with this tongue at all. Nonetheless, because of this U-throat construction, putting the boots on and taking them off is significantly easier than all the one-piece upper football boots that are currently on the market. Not to mention, it runs super deep and just allows the upper to expand and kind of squeeze your foot perfectly. There's so much adjustability because of this lacing setup, and I think they nailed the overall shape in general. The perfect amount of width, the perfect amount of volume, and as far as comfort is concerned, the Mizuno Alpha series, in my opinion, whether it's the Pro, the Elite, or the Made in Japan variation, they're just the most comfortable synthetic speed boots on the market, period. Moving to the rear, again, you're going to find a construction and materials used that are almost identical to the $320 variation. It's a low-cut design with a little bit of an extended tail, and then the heel lining material, it looks like a mesh, but it's coated in this really soft silicone material that gives it this nice amount of grip that does an amazing job of gripping your heel and kind of holding it in place in a way that still feels super, super comfortable. The perfect amount of padding, I really love the shaping of it. And then the insole is also different, but still pretty decent. Not that I think many people are buying any football boot at any price point for the insole specifically. It doesn't have the grippy liner on the surface. Instead, it's actually just straight up foam, no liner whatsoever. A little bit of texturing on the surface, but it's made from a single layer of this black foam that, as far as high-end football boot insoles go, if this was on a more expensive model, I really wouldn't have a problem with it. And again, super above average in terms of what you're going to find from just about any football boot at this price point. When it comes to weight, unfortunately, what we see far too often when it comes to takedown model speed boots is that they end up being nowhere near the same weight as the high-end model, and in some cases, they're not even light at all, which I think is not what most people would expect when buying a boot in this category. Is that, however, the case with the Mizuno Alpha Pro? We're about to find out as we compare it to the model above it in the $200 Mizuno Alpha Elite. Both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the more expensive model, basically the top end version. They weigh in at 7.05 ounces, the equivalent of 200 grams exactly, which is on the lighter end of most speed boots currently available. Then we'll throw on the Pro model, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.75 ounces, the equivalent of 220 grams. So obviously a fairly big difference between these two, the Pro weighing 20 grams more than the Elite, but as far as takedown model speed boots go, these are still going to be on the lighter end of things, and in general, being under 8 ounces is still pretty impressive. And just to prove a point, here are the two similarly priced main competitors from both Adidas and Nike in the Vapor 15 Pro and the Crazy Fast Point 2, both in the same size 9.5 US as the Mizunos. The Nikes weigh in at 7.95 ounces, the equivalent of 225 grams, so technically 5 grams more than the Alphas, which is not overly significant. And then the Adidas boots weigh in at a ridiculous 9.4 ounces, the equivalent of 266 grams. It's crazy that they even call these speed boots. With the base of the Alpha Pro realistically being where the extra weight comes from when comparing these to the Alpha Elite and Made in Japan variations. You are still going to get that external heel counter in solid plastic directly connected to the sole plate itself. However, instead of having those kind of inserts in the forefoot as well as the heel, just utilizing different types of plastics, I'm assuming ones that are a little bit lighter than what they've used here, you are going to get that couple extra grams with the Alpha Pro. Although, for the vast majority of people, again, unless you have the Pro on one foot and the Elite or the Made in Japan variation on the other, it would be very difficult to tell a weight difference between the two. From a flex perspective, there's an argument to be made that this is maybe a little bit softer in terms of flex. It doesn't have quite the same spring back effect, but again, the difference is extremely subtle. But as far as takedown model sole plates go in general, speed boot or not, this still feels and looks extremely premium, so no major complaints from me here. And then of course you are getting the same Mizuno Alpha stud pattern that you do get on the top end models, featuring these triangular studs really good weight distribution across at the bottom of the foot, and in general, very aggressive, providing plenty of bite, as you'd expect from a modern day speed boot. On feet, there is nothing that makes the Mizuno Alpha Pro look or feel like a takedown model, and perhaps even more impressively, there's pretty much nothing about these boots that makes them fit or feel different than the far more expensive models above them. The fact that this $160 football boot feels so similar to one that can retail for $320 is just mind-blowing. We've never seen it before in the world of football boots, period. This upper feels like something that should be on a top-end model. It fits great. The overall shaping is identical to the more expensive variations. The adjustability, because of that nice deep central lacing system, is fantastic. The heel lockdown is great, both because of that sticky heel liner. They even give you the extra lace hole right there if you do want that little bit of extra lockdown. And in general, the padding, the flexibility, everything about this football boot is pretty much ready to go out of the box. In the speed category, I don't think there's a more comfortable option. The Mizuno Alpha, they just absolutely nailed it there. As far as width is concerned, plenty of width to these, to the point where I think they're going to be suitable for just about everybody. If you have extremely wide feet, maybe you might have some issues, but like I said, most people should fit very comfortably in these because of how adjustable they are. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US. They do run a smidge long like the other high-end Mizuno Alpha models do. However, not enough for me to justify going down in size. So if you're currently wearing your boots a little bit too big, half a size down might not be a bad idea, but for the vast majority of people, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, the Mizuno Alpha Pro is a football boot that I can highly recommend. When you're talking about mid-level price point football boots in the speed category, I can't say that I've ever experienced one that doesn't drop off any of the core elements that you'll find on the top end models. Yes, there's a few extra grams because of the difference in the sole plate construction, but those extra grams are hardly noticeable, and in general, the experience of this football boot is every bit as good as what you'd find from the version that costs twice as much. And for those that saw my review of the Elite version of this boot, I basically said I don't think anybody should realistically spend $320 on the Made in Japan variation, because for $200 you can effectively have the exact same experience. And unless you care about every single gram, I kind of have the same opinion about the Mizuno Alpha Pro. Why spend $200 on the Elite when for $40 less at $160 you can have something that in my eyes is equally as good? And as far as comparing them to their main competition from Nike and Adidas, these will definitely not have the appeal to most people as a Mercurial or a Crazy Fast model, but for the same amount of money or less, I can honestly say that these blow those alternatives out of the water.